And what's up?
Hold
How
on
you
a minute.
doing?
This isn't the Joe Rogan experience.
No, no, no. You got to pay me a lot more money than him, dude. $200 million ain't gonna cut it for me, dude. Not, no, sir. Not when you got not when you got Orthodox Jewish school to pay for.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing I know where the money's going.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. By the way, you can audit me. I'll give you my receipts. You'll know exactly where every penny's going to, dude. I'm not hiding anything, man. What's going on? How you been?
Oh, all good. Things have been busy. I keep forgetting. I really should know this by now, but every time I think I'm gonna have a chill summer with time in the sun, I'm gonna go camping like every other week. Then I realize summer is a brewer's busy season.
Oh yeah. How so? Sorry, I had a cigar in my mouth. How so?
Well, pumpkin season mostly. That kind of
Oh
ramps
yes.
things up. You do everything in advance, and yeah, no, I mean, you've got a lot of volume to keep up, especially since everyone else is having fun of the summer. You got to keep the grocery store shelves stocked. So, but no, I mean, no, summer's been great, really. Busy's fine. Um,
Dude, can you believe that summer's over?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
crazy.
Once it starts raining, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally. Dude, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. First of all, I think that you could probably blame Starbucks for your summer your pumpkin season starting in the summertime because you notice that every year that the pumpkin spice latte gets pushed a little earlier and a little earlier, and so that kind of drives the entire market. I feel like for what the to prepare ourselves for the pumpkin spice season. How long do you need typically to get like a batch of flavored beer into rotation? When do you start with the Christmas stuff, for example, or the winter stuff?
Well, it's a funny thing you asked that. We just started clearing up the first Bifrost of the season, so that's our specialty winter beer,
Yeah,
and we're just about ready to put that into packages, and it's not even October.
that's crazy. How does that work? It takes months to brew it, or it takes months to brew at that volume.
It doesn't. It's mostly about logistics and planning things out with vendors. This is a side of the operation I have almost no familiarity with.
Right.
Wholesalers, vendors, and everybody who coordinates with logistics and sales and marketing. Uh, Everything like sort of takes time, and when it's time to hit the shelves, everything kind of has to be in place in the on the back end behind that.
Sure.
So we kind of have to set them up so that all the retailers have what they need well in advance.
So it is primarily because of volume. Like if you guys were at a brewery where the only place you can get your beer is at the tap room, then you could start making beer in October, November for season time.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely part of it.
Huh. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Um, I wanted to just oh man. Okay. I'm not sure. Do you want to talk first about your radio show in Binghamton? Because I was talking to Rami about that the other day when we were recording together. Because he was telling me how much he loved your episode. He's like, Sam has the perfect voice and the perfect temperament and the perfect personality. And I was like, well, it's not like it's his first rodeo. So you can either I want to either open with that, or I want
We
to open with asking your thoughts on the debate slash Trump getting shot, like or attempted the attempted assassination yesterday.
we can start with something more pleasant, which is
Yes,
definitely the radio show. No, I mean I'm happy to talk about both of those.
but we
Uh,
will. But
the
I want to do I want to
it's
do I want to
funny.
do I want to do that. So the goal of the podcast is to be as both accurate, honest, and intelligent, but in as pleasant of a way and as palatable as a way as possible, as least divisive,
Oh,
So that's the goal. Like that's my goal with everything that I want to talk about on the podcast, to be as pleasant as possible.
for sure, for sure.
Okay, so let's start the radio show then.
It's funny that Avrami mentions that because I started I did the episode that we did a couple of weeks ago. I did start to try to listen to it. I don't know what it is, but I'm just one of those people that once I hear my own voice in a recording, I just immediately cringe and I close out of the window. I just can't listen.
By the way, I'm with you. I haven't. I have not listened back to a single one of my episodes yet.
Yeah.
I
It,
can't.
it,
I'm not interested. I don't edit. I don't do anything. I'm like, you know what? I trust. I have to trust the flow. I have to trust the conversation. I have to just trust the fact that it's going to be good, and just get it out there. I can't listen to myself.
yeah, same here. But
No,
it,
I'm
but
glad.
it's
Yeah.
but talking into a microphone is one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Oh, really?
So the dichotomy between that in itself is pretty interesting. But yeah,
The
radio I think was the thing that kind of like kept me going in college because like that was kind of a it was a weird time in my life because the academic expectations and how they differed from high school were so stark that I kind of floundered a lot, and I have a lot of like regrets about how my academic career played out. In the end, everything worked out like okay, like but going to college, and in the end of the day, I don't think I was just ready. I don't think I was ready on a maturity level. But that being said, like
Wait, can you
radio was
elaborate? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because do you
just
feel like high school was easier or harder, or what do you feel like?
high school was easy because it's still like everything is like planned for you. You know, you have teachers. There's like just the way it's structured. There's accountability, but when you go to college, it's like it's all on you. Like nobody's there to ride you, no one's there to police you, no one's there to make sure you're doing your homework. If you're not mature enough, this is the thing that like a lot of people make this mistake, and it's kind of good that people are becoming more skeptical about how they approach going to college or sending their kids to college, because like a lot of people just aren't ready at 18. I really wasn't ready. I actually needed even older, 19, because I took a year in yeshiva.
Right.
Uh, and they describe it as being drunk with freedom. I guess that's part of it, but just the way to handle the pressure, like the fact that you don't really. I mean, there are resources, but if you don't have the right temperament, if you don't have the right mindset, where it's like you're doing all the work that you're putting in is only for you, and only you can make you do it. It's basically everybody's first real sense of, for most Americans anyway, it's most real sense of working for yourself.
Right.
And it's a totally different mindset, especially if you're coming from high school, which is everything is mandated and scheduled. You don't have to be you don't have to be a valedictorian. You don't have to be like one of the high achieving kids. Not everybody does a whole bunch of activities, but any schlub can pass high school easily, because it probably, at least if they come from a home that isn't totally broken, at least they have their parents like kicking them in the ass and forcing them to get the work done. In college, that just doesn't happen, and I sort of fell victim to that. And I think radio was like one of the only things that kind of that I liked doing. I liked the schedule of getting up. The that those were
You
the
you had you wait
obligations.
you I would well, so you had shows at all kinds of odd times, right? I remember you had an early morning show at one point, right?
During the semester, you were scheduled for a show at every time, at the same time, same day every week. When the season was out, when everybody was on winter break or summer break or whatever, if you were there just hanging out at the university taking summer classes or whatever, you could come in and do a show whenever you want, as long as no one else was doing it. So
Right.
it was just you just had free reign of it.
But
So
during
if
the
I
semester you had crappy hours, I remember, right?
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent I wanted that. But yeah, I mean, like the real prime time hours when like a lot of people listening, like a lot of that was like public access programming.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it was also based on seniority. like if you were there for longest, like if you were senior,
Sure.
you were more primed to get like a chill, like, oh, hey guys, it's 7 p.m. It's my show on Wednesday evening or something like that.
Yeah, but you weren't privy to that.
No, no,
Not at
not at
first,
all.
at least. Not at first. Not at all. Well, because you started doing it your junior year, senior year.
Started my junior year,
So
and
you had two
and I wish I
years.
did it sooner. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're in high school. Your parents are kind of are relatively riding you, but I'm sure that you were also kind of mature enough to, get by and get pretty good grades yourself. And then you get to college and you have a lot more of a free schedule. Where, by the way, I really believe that in life, in general, learning to ask for help is an enormous skill that yields enormous results, right? Like most people would rather be lost than ask someone directions and waste a lot of time, trying to get from one place to the next because they're afraid to ask someone, how to get from point A to point B. And I've found a lot of life is like that. I've had dealers, that when I'm selling equipment, for example, if a customer asks me a question, I'll say I don't know. I'll call a dealer buddy that I know for a long time and ask them the question. And it saves me hours and hours of homework of trying to figure it out, and it saves me asking around other people and or making something up like an idiot, and just to say, hey, you're my, hey, do you think, can I ask you a question? You know a little bit more than I do. Can you help me out? And if you and like Binghamton had great resources if you're willing to knock on the door and say, hey, I need a hand, because the classes I did badly in, I did not. I never did badly in a class where I ever had a relationship to a teacher or asked anyone, for a hand. And the only classes I ever did badly in were the ones where I just tried to do myself and just make my way through and throw my hands up if I did badly, and that was it.
Yeah. It's the idea that the idea of asking for help in and of itself is an admission of defeat, uh, which is demoralizing. But also, I think for me specifically, because for a while I was in the engineering school, and you have a curriculum like, I mean, from when you're when you're a freshman and sophomore particularly, you have a set amount of classes, a set curriculum. When you get on to be an upperclassman, then you kind of branch off into your own speciality. But um, I think the fact that early on I was struggling with the engineering curriculum, but I think my thought process at the time was like, if I can't do this, then there is nothing else. What am I going to do?
Why'd you pick engineering to
Otherwise, it's
begin
waste.
with?
Mostly because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with college. I was in college because it was an expectation,
Right.
and it's like, well, if you're going to go to college, you got to do something, you got to learn something, you got to major at something that's going to net you a profitable career afterwards. You got to go into STEM.
Just that calculation is so far removed from what my calculation was, dude. I my calculation was the first class that I like a lot. I'm just gonna major in, and so I took creative writing, cinema, psychology, and I think Jewish history, which was a horrendous class. But and then after my first, and I guess I never ever considered for one second that college should be used as an opportunity to develop a skill that'd be useful for when I graduated. It wasn't on my radar. You were so far ahead of me at what, 19, 20 when you were making that decision.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's a problem, really. It's the way that most people see college, in the sense that it's an obligation. The fact that it's high-end vocational school.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually talking to Rami also about this notion because we were talking about how how college students in Israel tend to like the whole culture of college students in Israel is very different because they start after 3 years in the army. So you're not starting college as a 17 or 18-year-old whose balls are just dropping for the first time, but you're starting as someone that's been through the experience of potentially war, but at least relatively intensive training where you realize that life has a certain kind of ruggedness and seriousness to it that you don't just take for granted. And even if you do have a good time, that there's a certain discipline that's instilled in the students that I think is enormously beneficial. And people probably make better decisions as to what they study, when they're more mature than when they're young and fresh and also not necessarily, I mean, listen, I don't blame anyone for being 17 and not knowing what to do with yourself. I really, really don't. But
And
we need
and let's
guidance.
be honest. Let's be honest here. If you're going to be young and stupid, it's better to be in the armed forces. Think of it this way. If you want to look up like jackass type stunts and YouTube videos and that sort of thing, which would you rather see? Drunk, idiotic college students doing something dumb, or drunk, idiotic soldiers doing something dumb?
I
Which is going to make you laugh more?
don't know, man. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, dude, pick the army videos every time.
Yeah,
Those are hilarious.
I don't think I've ever seen a video of a foolish army soldier, doing anything dumb in my
I'm
life.
not even talking I'm not even talking like the Israeli forces
No, no, I
specifically.
know.
Like
Yeah,
yeah,
anything,
like
any
I've seen
American,
videos
whatever.
of I've seen videos of like U.S. Army mortarmen, just kind of taking the charge that you put behind a mortar shell to make it launch out of the tube. They just take a giant pile and burn it. They'll just like talk into the radio box to their superior, and they'll just go like, "Hey, you want me to shoot mortar over there?" And they're like, "What? What are you talking about? Who was there?" It was like, "Roger that, bombs away, yee yee."
Yeah, you know why? I guess because there's such a stark contrast between like what these guys are capable of and the lives they're living on an everyday basis to how goofy they're being. That that's part of what the humor is. The humor comes from the unexpected situations, and you just don't expect a responsible person that's supposedly protecting your country, to be acting like that. I'm sure that's what a lot of the humor is.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the army, the armed to be in the armed forces is it provides a lot of structure because like if and when you screw up, I mean you're designed to screw up. To be a soldier inherently means that you are broken down as an individual and reshaped with a collective identity. So when you screw up, it's intentional and you're not, I mean, unless you do something explicitly negligent when better has been expected of you for a while, or you do something criminal. Other
Right.
than that, when you screw up, it's basically expected of you. So you have so as a young person, as an 18 or 19 or whatever person in the armed forces, to go to the army and then go to college, it's not even just a matter of getting the stupidity out of your system. It's kind of the discipline and how to think outside of yourself when the responsibility is solely placed on you, when you're not always being supervised. That sort of prepares you not just for college better, but for life.
Sure.
Not that the armed forces are for everyone, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely, because it gives you a sense of staying. And by the way, for what one person in armed service career, let's say introductory career might do, for another person, a solid internship might help too. When I came to Binghamton, you weren't there my first year that I was there, right?
Right.
You had, was it an internship or a job, or you weren't in school for that year?
Yeah, yeah, no,
And you came
yeah, I
back and you
was.
switched your major because that was the first thing that I remember. One of the first things I remember talking to you about, because Austin introduced us, I think, and said, "Oh, my buddy Sam was an engineer, and I think he's switching to music or something like that."
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what happened. I just needed a year to. I took a break. I mostly just in terms of just to just get away from it and just try to get my head straight. I had a job as working in a discount liquor store, and which was like fine
That
and
was
everything.
Bottle
It
King.
was that was Bottle King, and it wasn't a terrible job or anything. But I mean, like you're a kid working retail. It's like in terms of it's like however you proceed, whether you want to go back to college or not, just immerse yourself in this and really ask yourself, do you want this to be the rest of your life?
Right, right. Which actually leads me exactly to the point that I was going to make, which is that if imagine if we started with a year or two internship prior to people going to college, and you test out the thing that you might be interested in studying on the ground level, and then say, this is for me, this isn't, so you don't subsequently waste your 4 years, the next 4 years. Listen, when I, I can't say that I regret anything that's ever happened because I love my life, thank God, and I really feel like I'm the luckiest person in all my experiences, however pleasant or unpleasant. Like I'm happy with my life now, and so that was kind of necessary to go through, right? But I mean, I would not tell my kid to be an English major, to be a creative writing and literature major. I wouldn't do it, and I would say, and even if they wanted to do something, like, listen, if you want to work for a year or two at some kind of media company, if you want to work a year or two as a writer, you want to work a year or two trying to get a job in Hollywood, by all means, go ahead. And if you love it, then go chase that English degree, but know what you're setting yourself up for because I mean, during when I was a senior, I would go to the business school. I think I got Zach Alexander's old SOM School of Management folder, and I would show up to the business school events where there, all these recruiting events from the big four firms, EY and Deloitte and PwC and what's the last one?
Uh,
Ernst
Lockheed
and Young.
Martin.
No, no, these are Ernst and Young, PwC, Deloitte, and KPMG, right?
KPMG.
And
All right.
so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to these guys, and there's there may be a real estate company there or a young startup or whatever, and they go and I give them my School of Management notebook with my resume and my whatever it is, my information inside of it, my previous job experience, my grades, and they'd open it up and and I'd have the same reaction. And listen, I was quote unquote catfishing them, I was hustling them, I was trying to get in through the front door
Yeah,
because I knew that,
you were doing a little fake business.
dude, if I applied, and this has happened to me hundreds of times, if I applied to a job as an English major, the algorithm caught my resume within a second and said, "Listen, this guy, this schmuck that's applying to your job that you require 2 years of experience in an MBA for." It went to, we I got a creative writing degree from Binghamton, and I didn't even get to get a word out, right? But at the very least, I go to these events and I shake the guy's hand and I start talking to him. I mean, at the very least, I give myself an opportunity in the door. But I don't want to. I don't want. I don't want to. Like you, I think that people should know that. I think people should know that what you're going through has a certain that what you choose to study has a certain amount of face value that will initially spark interest or do otherwise, and and I think that if people started working in that industry or in the job force first, they'd have a much easier time. You wouldn't have spent 2 years studying engineering if you started with that if you realize that you didn't want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, no,
Right.
I mean, it's like um, the way that the labor market has changed from the time of when not even just our grandparents, but when our parents were kids
Sure.
and young adults, is like it's completely different. The goalposts have shifted. The goalposts for financial security have shifted.
Yes.
Everybody likes to rip on our grandparents, the boomers, and when they say well, Sonny, if you want a job, you just approach them, shoulders back, firm handshake, and say, "Hello, Mister Firefighter. I'd like a job, please." And if they like your grit, if they like your gumption, they'll hand you a firefighter helmet and they'll say, "Report in tomorrow, son. You've got the job." That's all you need. No, 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 no. You don't understand, Grandpa. It's like you don't. No one goes in. Yeah, if I go in, they just tell me to apply online. No, you gotta go in, son. You have to physically go in, and you gotta. No, and I wish I was still in that time. Like, I wish it's like
Yeah.
you know how
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I didn't die in the war. I know how to turn a wrench. I'm not a complete moron. Can you please give me a job as a aeronautical construction engineer with Hughes Aircraft?
And they
That's
said, sure, you're hired, and the company was Boeing, and the year
or
was
yeah.
2019. You know, you know what? So I agree, and also I do remember distinctly with my friends in business school that they would say that the internship, like you had to be like in a good school with a great GPA, and then you kill the interview and have a great resume that you spent 100 years working on, and you get a job that they said they could have done sophomore year of high school, or an internship they could have done sophomore year of high school. And so like it almost feels like that, like a degree today is like part of like there's like it's part of like an inflation bubble, and like there's a bubble, and we're just I think that America in particular is kind of waiting for that bubble to pop because listen, student debt's one of the biggest financial problems that the country has at the moment. At least that anyone that's probably 35 and under have. I mean, there's a lot of people that took out a lot of loans and spend a very long time trying to pay it back, and that they didn't necessarily need to take, and they know that, and they can't do anything about it now. But I think that the more people know about it, that the more likely it's going to help the bubble along to pop and just become kind of almost start over like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like help the bubble along and pop. Because what I think the main thing that it's all about can be boiled down is in terms of where where labor can be sold, where your labor can be sold, how you can get the most value for what you do being generative. Because for the longest time after the war, in the post-war industrial boom or economic boom, it paid to be, basically to be a company man. You were going to work for a company for
Sure.
basically your entire life. Maybe you change jobs once, maybe twice, but they're going to take care of you. You work for them your entire life, and they take care of you. And and the value that was being generated was such that that was feasible. Like that was a feasible economic model, and it was why somebody with just a high school education working a blue collar job could support could support a wife and kids,
Sure.
send the kids to college, and have good things in life. But the fact that that's also inflated, people are even now coming to
Dude,
this
you have to make $300,000 a
realization.
year to do that. You got to make $300,000 or more to do that.
Well,
You know?
right, and the fact that the financial goalposts have moved is one of the main things that have sparked this, in the sense that the needs of everybody to have what their parents had, what their parents had growing up. It's like, if I want to give my kids what I had growing up, uh, I need to find some other way to be generative. I need to
Yes.
find some other way to recoup value for however I can be
Yes.
generative. And I can't. Increasingly, people can't rely on the corporate model, which is not to say that there aren't jobs that can do that. It's just that there aren't enough for everybody to do that. You can
Yes.
the idea that you can just have a GED or a high school diploma and support a family in a comfortable lifestyle, and you're the only breadwinner. That is already that's been gone for years.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that.
extremely rare. Yeah, it's extremely rare. And like it's like Michael, our old buddy Michael Eisner said, right? Which was, he was being interviewed for that Disney War book, and he's saying, and he looked at the guy, and he's like, listen, he goes, I'm the last of my type. This is 2004 or five. He goes, you are not going to have another English major running a Hollywood studio ever again. He goes, I'm fired, I'm done. He goes, the next guys that the Disney hires are going to be MBAs. And the next guys are going to be lawyers. The next guys are going to be, like there's not going to be, there's this thing as like loving Shakespeare and then making your way through a studio by telling stories and working hard and writing notes, and then getting to become CEO of the biggest entertainment company in American history. Like it just doesn't exist anymore. It's very interesting. It's really odd. It's really cool.
It's something that I thought about even when I was in radio, because when I was doing my college radio show, it often crossed my mind just, oh my God, how much I love this. And to be fair, like it didn't really take a lot of discipline to do what I did. It just took like a little bit of chill. You had to be in the zone. You had to know your equipment. And you kind of had to, like, I never considered myself a person who was great at schmoozing. I don't really have the gift of gab, but sometimes, and you can tell as somebody who told me that you enjoyed listening, sometimes when you just talk, and when you just kind of let yourself, when you just let the words flow off your tongue and you're not even necessarily thinking about every word that you say,
Yes,
which I'm prone
yes,
to do,
yes.
it just
Preach.
sounds beautiful. It
It
sounds
does.
beautiful,
That's how I write.
which I hate so much. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate the fact that I have that capacity somewhere deep down inside me, but for the most part, when I'm talking socially or talking into a microphone or even talking with you right now, the fact that I am so uh like jealous about that in like an evil way that I can't just get out of my own way and just, accept things for what they are.
You gotta hit a J. That's your problem, dude. You gotta have a shot of bourbon. That's what you need. Okay. You have an overactive prefrontal cortex, dude. You need to shut that shit down.
Well, what I
Seriously.
really need is a transorbital lobotomy.
That would be the next best case. But we can
Yeah.
stick with weed and alcohol for now, and then you can try that if that doesn't work. But I yeah, dude. And you know what? For me, that kind of writing's been forget about my best writing. It's been my most therapeutic writing. That stream of consciousness and just letting go of that filter part of your brain and that filter part of yourself that just says like, listen, you gotta make sure this looks right. You gotta make sure this sounds right. You gotta make sure that word is perfect. First of all, I do believe that speaking conversation is a muscle, like any other muscle, and the more you exercise it, the better you get at it. And I've found that since I started doing this, any kind of small talk that I do has become so much more fun because I've kind of learned to look to kind of take conversation to different angles and go different and run different places with them as I go along, that's a muscle. That's something that you have to really work out. Like doing push-ups, you gotta practice having conversations. But there's strands, right? So there's you're telling you you tell me about about how like we're almost 40 minutes into it right now, and we're just getting through your story of how you got to do the radio show, because you just plucked at so many strands and details, and we just pulled at these yarns, and they just took us in so many directions, and they're so pleasant. It's so much fun that like that's a muscle. That's something that that we can do all the time. And I do think, by the way, that I know that I know you have that skill, and I also know that it's probably a little less, it's probably a little more superficial, like closer to the surface than you're probably giving yourself credit for, I imagine. Because you're doing this now on the drop of a dime. You don't know what we're going to talk about tonight. And I just texted you, an hour ago. You ready to talk? You're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So you got to be pretty good at that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it sort of begs the question though, and something I've thought about is when it comes to, like, obviously there's a limited amount of how much demand there is for uh, I guess you would say productions where it's mostly just casual conversations. Right. I mean, like, obviously, the Joe Rogan podcast is like the king of it because it's just like sort of a free form conversation, and obviously, like with his guests, like you get a variety of like really surface level to like really heavy stuff, and then it sort of oscillates between those two states of conversation.
Sure.
Uh, what like you have to wonder, like, is it able to be quantified in any sort of way? Like, what is it about a casual conversation between two perfect strangers that someone would want to listen to and give their time,
Oh,
especially in this way?
you don't know? You don't, you can't imagine why? You don't see what the draw is?
It's not that I can't imagine why, it's just that I don't know if it can be quantified.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you could quite quantify it either. I think that you have to be adept at least conversational in probably 50 to 100 different, subjects, right? And you have to be a curious person. There's actually, it's so funny. I was talking, there's a guy that's in my community. He's my good friend. His name's Shua, and he's in med school now, right? And
Did I meet Shua? I'm sorry to take you off your track, but did I meet Shua when I was at your place for Purim one year?
no, because I only met him in South Florida.
Oh,
So,
mi-
yeah, I
someone
only met him
different. Okay.
recently.
No,
Yes.
so you were saying he's in med school now.
So he's in med school now, and something I've noticed about him is it's funny because he doesn't come across as particularly book smart, right? But he's just, and then I've noticed this about him recently. He's an intensely curious person. Like he's really just wondering what's going on, and it makes him social, and it makes him conversational, and it makes him a good student, and it makes him a good learner because the more that he is genuinely like, I'm interested, tell me about that might be something I want to add to my repertoire of things I care about and things I enjoy about life, right? Tell me more about that, tell me about that from this angle and that angle. And you could stick him in a room with anyone or with a lot of people, and he makes excellent conversation just because, and you could tell in his face, by the way, because he's also very animated in a very funny way, that like he has this perpetually curious look on his face. Like his eyebrows are like always a little half raised in surprise, and like his lips almost make like an O, like like ooh kind of like look while like he's listening to what you're saying, and it encourages further conversation, you know. So you have,
It,
I think,
it's
yeah,
it's a really enviable position to naturally be a student. I think people, in the way that most people fall into different, different variables, like whether you're naturally more intelligent in one facet or another, whether you're naturally athletic or naturally bookish. I think one of the things that people naturally, one of the dichotomies that people naturally fall into are whether they're more naturally a student or more naturally a teacher. And if you're naturally a student, socially that gears you to be a good listener, right? And people
right,
love that. People love hearing their voices heard. So if you're just willing to just sit there and listen to them, whether or not you're actually interested or whether or not you're actually gaining anything, that doesn't really matter. It naturally endears you to people. It really is an enviable position because I know people who are naturally teachers, and I also love like sharing information. Even though like I think like I also have the capacity to listen a lot, listen pretty well with quality, but uh, when it comes to people, and we've all come across people in this who are life, people who are very smart, but they're very antisocial. They don't like socializing, and they don't always know how to get the words out in a way that's very charismatic. They can be, and to be fair, a lot of the time they can be tough to listen to, and you really have to pity, not even pity like in a condescending way, but it's sad
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's sad because a lot of times when they try to shine, when they try to, share the type of person they are by, espousing something that they have a very deep and profound knowledge of, if it's not interesting and exciting and grabbing, if they're meeting an acquaintance,
sure,
people will literally. I've met tons of people who will literally just look away and start talking to someone else like you weren't even there. It's one of the worst feelings, and it can send a person into a deep, like mentally, it can send you into a
deeply insecure place, yeah, in a
very
dark place,
a very dark place.
right. Yeah, because it demolishes someone's entire sense of self-worth and value in just a casual turn of the head,
It tells
like that
them
one instant.
it tells them that there is no mechanism for them to engage with their fellow humans as a member of this social species that we are, and that is devastating.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And you know what? I mean, I I can't say, I'm a little embarrassed to say this. I can't say that I might have that I haven't 100% done that to people in my life. Like I'm someone that's
Yeah.
very, especially when I have things competing for my attention. So, for example, and I find this happened to me a lot when I was living in Manhattan. You'd be in a room with 20 people, you'd be in a room with 100 people, you'd be in a room with 300 people,
Yeah, of
and you
course.
see 30 people that you know, and people are coming by, and I'm asking, I say to you, "How are you? It's so good to see you. What are you up to in life?" And the second those words come out of my mouth and you start to respond, I'm already like, "Hey man, what's going on? How are you?" Because like someone just came up behind, to join the conversation. And on one hand, I'm either I'm blowing both people off, and the truth is that I should have blown off the person that was just joining the conversation, the person instead of the person that started engaging with already. Um, but especially in big social spaces. I feel like that happens more often. Like that's more of like a risk. It's a higher risk in a densely socially populated area.
The bigger the room, the more people in the room, the more inevitable it's going to be. Right?
Yeah.
It's not the fact that a person who just kind of has like not a short attention span, but in the sense that you're talking where there's a lot of different elements in the room competing for your attention. It's not that most of the time, whether it's you or just anybody else that I've met in my life who does this, it's not that it's never malicious. It's
Sure.
never actually been malicious. It's not that they're trying to be an asshole.
Well, there are
It,
times that people are.
well, no, I mean no, for sure. But I'm talking about the people, casually, the people that most of us kind of relate to in our lives, who have seen that happen, who have observed that happen, or if we're guilty of doing that.
Right. Definitely. Hmm. Yeah. I hear, and I actually, and oh man, and but so there's two things, right? Like, there's the actual breaking of someone that when that happens, and then there's also someone's actual inability to kind of grab the attention of others, despite their knowledge or not, right? Or despite how well versed they are in any particular topic, if they're not going to present it well. Like there are so many podcasts that I've started listening to, where they've looked incredible and they were right down my alley, and like there was something I'd be 100% interested in. I'm ready to go, and I start listening, and I'm 2 minutes in, 5 minutes in, I'm like, or 10 minutes in, I just cannot listen to this guy's voice anymore you know. But circling back, I guess that's part. So I guess engagement is probably what. So you have in order to be a successful shooter of the shit, right? You got to be able to you got you got to be able to talk about a lot. You got to be engaging in a way that when people listen, they're interested in just listening to your voice. You have a good voice to listen to, which I do think that you have, and I hope that I have. But I know that on the other hand, even if I don't have that voice, I could make conversation for an extended period of time, which is that other skill that you probably need. So I think those three, having a lot of interest, being engaging, and being able to take a conversation and pull it like a piece of chewed up gum or something like that. Just keep on yanking at it is the key to success.
One of the most fun things you can experience are to see people who excel in the art of conversation, especially when they only excel phenomenally in one aspect. Like you mentioned, like specifically you mentioned before, if they only have like a really great voice. Like I can imagine, this is only a hypothetical, but like the great late Christopher Lee.
Mhm.
The guy had I mean, you remember what he sounds like, right? How long has it been since you watched Lord of the Rings? Uh, he had a deep booming voice, and he was a guy who led probably just the most interesting life a person can lead. And he had a very interesting background, being a descendant of Charlemagne, a direct descendant of Charlemagne, to being an intelligence agent in the Second World War. And he had just such a profound knowledge of art and culture and martial arts and all that. I feel it's funny to think, like, if you were having a conversation with somebody like Christopher Lee, and you were leading off like very casually, and you tried to impress him with a little bit of knowledge, like, say like, hey, let me, Mr. Lee, like, what, here's the thing about bone density machines, and yada
Yeah.
yada yada. If he just completely ignored what you said, but he was like looking at you very attentively, like you were the center of his attention, and he just sort of like leaned into you with a very attentive gaze, and he said, "Do you know something interesting about European swords?" You would be like, "Oh my god, forget whatever I was saying. I want to hear this."
Sure, sure.
Somebody who is so charismatic that no matter where you wanted the conversation to go, they can just immediately co-opt it, and they are the center of attention.
So you're talking
No
about a
questions
bully. You're
asked.
talking about a
No, no, no.
conversational bully.
Christopher Lee wasn't a bully. I mean, I know what you're talking about, but it's somebody who is just so charismatic they can't even help but be the center of attention. You know what I mean?
Okay, so it's the unconscious, but it's the dominator of the room. It's the personality where you walk in, and he or she's the magnet in the room. Like that's
Do
yeah.
you know what it's like to hear a man get stabbed in the back?
you know, I don't know, man. I think it's fun. I think that, and then I think, by the way, the other thing that people enjoy, that I hope that they enjoy, is I think people genuinely like watching people or sharing an experience where they feel like they're with someone having a good time. That's what sitcoms are. That's what Seinfeld is. That's what Friends. Like, none of it means anything. Frasier is not a show about anything. Like, okay, loosely you could say, okay, you want to give it like a little bit of depth. This guy is a psychiatrist and his dad's a cop, and you're like, great, like. But now what's the show about? It's about everyone having a good time, and like, and people sharing with that experience, and they really look at everyone. I mean, and that's what and you look at Frasier. Kelsey Grammer isn't Kelsey Grammer to me. He's Frasier to me. And he's that person. And that's
Right.
actually, I think, it's also a dangerous thing for a lot of personalities, right? Because Tony Soprano, can you imagine what it was like being freaking
Can you
Jim?
imagine? Can you imagine Tony Soprano filing his taxes?
Well, no, because he's Tony Soprano. But what's his name? James Gandolfini. Jim
Oh,
Gandolfini.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. So like you can't like imagine if you're James Gandolfini, The Sopranos just wrapped. You are no longer James Gandolfini like the rest of your life, and like everyone knows you as someone else, and everyone thinks of you as someone else. I read a story. I was reading the HBO book. Oh, crap, I forgot. Jim Miller. Jim Miller is the author. Awesome writer. He did a book about the CIA. He did a book about ESPN, and he did a book about HBO. And the way he writes books, he doesn't just write a book. It's not a book. It's a compilation of interviews. So what he'll do is, let's say he's recording me, you, Chaim, and Ari about our year in Seattle, right? So the book would start with Sam. I get a call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and it's Effie, and he says, do you want to come to Seattle? And then so that's what's written in the book as your quote, right? And then the next quote will be Ephraim Hirschman. So I call my buddy Sam, and I'm like, there's no way he's gonna move. And then Sam responds, and then I said, sure, I'll come. Why not? It sounds like a fun time. So he takes thousands and thousands of hours of interviews and compiles it into almost like a screenplay of like he makes a story, he makes a drama and like a narrative out of the combination of interviews. And then Chaim will be like, as far as I knew, it was just me and Effie living in Seattle, and then all of a sudden two guys pull up and have no idea that they're even living with us. And then Ari, and then I said, oh yeah, I forgot. And then it cuts to me. It says Ephraim, oh yeah, I forgot to tell Chaim that I told Ari and Sam to move in with us. And so imagine reading a book conducted of thousands of interviews with employees throughout the company, from the companies throughout the years. So he's writing about. So obviously, one of the things when you're covering HBO is you're covering The Sopranos, and James Gandolfini was visiting a sick kid in the hospital. I think he was dying. I believe he was dying at that point, and and the kid asked for his the mother asked for his signature, and he wrote,
And he goes,
buddy.
"What, you think you're the only one who watched my fucking signature?"
Excuse me. Yeah. He but he writes, like get back, you're a champion, keep on fighting, love Jim, right? And the mom looks at him and goes, can you sign it from the other guy? And he goes, sure. And then he takes it and he signs it Tony Soprano, right? But the point is that like you you become, especially when you're famous for shooting the shit and like having a good time, everyone that becomes your identity to the world. You know, Joe Rogan is Joe Rogan is the dude sitting on the podcast asking these questions and talking about mushrooms and DMT and aliens and stuff like that. I mean, the dude like has like a family and like kids and like I'm sure that that's not all the depth that there is to his life.
Right,
We
he's
just
not he's not sitting at the dining room table with his kids, and he just goes, oh, what you learn in school today? Whatever my oldest son's name is. He's like, oh, I don't know, Dad. We started calculus. Oh, wow, calculus. Do you think that like a naked chimp on DMT could even consider calculus? Like he doesn't do that.
No, no, I'm sure he doesn't. But the point, but we all think of him like that. So for him, it's got to be crazy, and for us, we've got to be foolish to think that that someone's entire existence and someone's entire being is what we're exposed to for 2 hours of the day, 4 days a week, which is probably the most, by the way, that anyone ever exposes themselves in real time, you know, ever. I mean, even if you take the totality of all of these TV shows like Seinfeld or Grey's Anatomy or ER or whatever it is, right? Like the amount of time that each person spends on screen as this fictional version of themselves or this limited version of themselves, it's got to be a fraction compared to what Rogan's got out just on the podcast alone, or what Lex Friedman has, or what any of these longtime people have been doing. And so you get even more caught up with it, I think. I'm sure. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard about the whole thing about people getting into character and a character like subsuming their identity,
Do you
and
believe in that?
well, not in the sense where it's
Like, do you
like,
believe that the Joker? What's his name? Who's the guy that died after playing the Joker? What's his name? Famous actor,
oh,
Heath Ledger. Heath
Heath
Ledger.
Ledger, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
think that like people love saying, "Oh yeah, the Joker," playing the Joker made him crazy, and that's why he overdosed.
No, no, I think he was just a drug addict. No, I think when people normally when people think about that, that's sort of the romanticized, crazy situation that doesn't really happen. Um, I think when that sort of idea gets talked about, it's mostly in the form of what you just discussed. The fact that James Gandolfini could get asked for a signature by a kid who's sick, but he doesn't want it signed by James Gandolfini. He wants it signed by Tony Soprano. I don't think Gandolfini, or
That's
at
got to be
least not to my.
devastating as a human being, though, don't you think?
You know what? I don't really know. I think it depends on your disposition. I think it depends on how long you've been doing it. It depends on the people that you surround yourself with, or I mean, like, honestly, if you're in Hollywood, like the people who surround you. There's definitely a bit of victimization. I mean, you can definitely go down a big rabbit hole with that. But I think for the most part, when people talk about actors being subsumed by the identities that they portray, I think it's more benign in the sense that um, people people who aren't in their lives immediately, people who don't see them every day in a familial and professional context, see them as that first, and it's kind of weird, or and again, depending on who you are, you can just like snap at people. You don't want to deal with people, you don't want to deal with your fans, you don't want to deal with the general public
Yeah,
even,
because it's not really you.
because it's not really you, and nobody really knows the real you. And if like all these people don't really know the real me and don't even have an interest, it's like, why would I even bother? Like,
Right.
why would I even bother like trying to be the actor who, is nice to fans on the street, or goes to a children's hospital. Like like I mean, I don't want to like there's plenty of actors, and it's not this isn't a bash this isn't a bashing actors with bad attitudes podcast, but like you know
That'd be a great dude. Can you imagine how good of a podcast that would be?
oh,
Dude,
I'm sure there's tons of them.
you'd have incredible stories coming out of the woodwork for years, dude,
Oh no, of
of these
course.
actors, dude.
One time I met Alex Baldwin, and he said that if I don't get out of his face, I'm gonna be the next person he shoots. Wow, that's so cool, sir. Can you tell us more? Tell us more. I mean,
Yeah, and then the other problem is also,
it'd be
by
a
the way,
little
that
it
even
would be a little
catching
salacious.
but even when you catch these people at these moments, the other thing is that people take these moments and make that person's identity for their entire lives too, which I also dislike tremendously. I think it's not a fair way for a human to live. That, you know, a Chaim Hirschman goes to visit local kid in cancer ward, right? And that becomes my identity for, like, no matter what I do. Let's say a week later, you have no idea. You know how much time a week is for a person to live, for him to screw up or be a good person or be an in between person or do absolutely nothing. Like, that is so much time. But 2 seconds of someone's life, or 2 minutes of someone's life, or an hour, what could be their identity for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Especially if you're an actor. You say, "Oh, what do you know about I was just listening to a podcast recently on Huberman, and there's a guy that was talking about I think it was Mariah Carey had like some kind of like technical problem a couple of years ago when she was singing for New Year's Eve, and he's like, everyone forgot that she was Mariah Carey in that minute, and everyone forgot for the next like month that she was Mariah Carey, because the only thing that she was at for that month was just this person that just did, that screwed up the PA system, or refused to sing the song or didn't do the song the right way, and like you forget about entire life before, you forget about entire life after, like your entire life becomes defined by these incremental and most of the time, I imagine, probably arbitrary moments. Like, you just got lucky that they picked that moment out of any other moment that you've lived. It's so strange.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's weird, and this is probably like a pretty cliched to a point, but it's kind of to see that sort of thing happen. In a way, it's like sort of seeing the man behind the curtain. It's like you know, watching the curtain come down and seeing all the mechanisms behind the production that make the magic, and it's all revealed, and now it's all ruined. The fact that you have these people who portray certain ideals and certain characters that make an impression on you, to see them as actual human beings, and
Yeah,
particularly in a sense that they're flawed, it kind of like ruins the magic.
by the way,
Which,
that's why I love to read about my heroes, because like if like Bruce Springsteen, right? Like I would read about him, and the more I read about him, the more I liked. Frank Sinatra, not so much. I mean, and then I became less inclined to listen to his music after that.
right. It's the whole concept of never meet your heroes, but it's healthy to do that. It really is, because you meet people who I mean, you've probably met people who really celebrity worship, or just the latest gossip about celebrities is their entire existence. They just live and breathe, what Sly Stallone said when he went to a deli and accosted a waitress. Like it's like it becomes like sort of a dark obsession, uh, and it's kind of weird to look at from the outside, uh, but I don't know. Like, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but you know what I mean. It's a very weird state of being that, looking at you, kind of glad you're observing it rather than living it, because I can't even imagine living that.
Right, right. But the point was that people, you have a hero, but people don't even look at the way the hero actually lives. And I think that people also under exaggerate or underrate maybe they don't quite realize how much time is in a day and how much and how much people can do in a day or a week or a month or a year, and so they pick arbitrary moments that make this hero a hero, but they don't actually know like what's going on the rest of their lives, like. And what made me think about this initially actually was I went to a John Fogerty concert last year, right, from Creedence Clearwater Revival, and
Hmm.
he's playing, and I would say all but one song was written prior to 1975, right? Now you have this guy that is probably one of the most culturally significant musicians in modern American history, I would even argue, right? Like Creedence Clearwater Revival was like the anthem and the heart and soul of the anti-war movement and and the anti-establishment movement in the late '60s, early '70s, right? And he's up there and he's playing all the same songs exactly the same way that he wrote them 50 years ago or 60 years ago, you know and like what? And I turned to my wife, and I'm like, what has he been doing for the last 60 years? He doesn't have more than one song that was written early, later than 1972. And like, yeah, but I look at him, I'm like, John Fogerty's like a musical hero, like he's a lyricist, and he came up with all these great riffs and all these incredible, hit one after the next, after the next, after the next, that are culturally relevant and amazing to listen to, and you're like, but then he stopped for 60 years, and what's he been doing? So like, how could someone like that you don't even know anything about their lives for 60 years, and you based your perception of them on 5 years when they were 23 to 28, like how could that be a hero for most people? I think it's
Well,
strange.
uh, I think it's because in that period he was giving people what they wanted, and now at the point where he's however old he is, he's just kind of like delivering on what people like. I think that there's a profound difference between liking and wanting. Colloquially, they're synonymous. And it's funny, I was actually just thinking about this idea because we have, we're trying to think of like how we're going to fill a niche in the market with wheat beer. But when it comes to the difference between liking and wanting, liking is mostly based in routine. It's based on precepts that you're already locked into.
Right.
I like a certain album that I've listened to 1,000 times before. I
But I want
like,
to
I
find
like, I
something else,
like
right?
my cup of coffee in the morning. Uh, but that doesn't really speak to, and that's an important part of life. Like people can, people need stability, and there's a certain sense of security that comes from routine and stability. But when it comes to a deeper part of what people are actually looking for, that's when you start to really get into want. And if you want to put it into a cynical context, or maybe not even a more cynical context, but a more cynical word, it's like, what do people want? The short answer is people want what they don't have. Wanting is coveting. People want what they've never had. People like what they always have. People will be unhappy if they stop having what they like, but people will never truly be happy unless they acquire what they want.
Right. And I would actually argue that the flip side of that is probably it's what we call, dreaming or imagination, which is that what what about your life would you want to that you don't have right now that you're trying to strive for or work for? And in order to do that, you have to comprehend a world that's not right in front of you and that's not routine, right? Um, and then I guess depending on the direction, it's also funny because all the Disney villains I feel like are kind of stuck between those two worlds. All the villains are very clearly people that desire something that they don't have, and the way they behave manifests in the negativity of what the this darker, cynical, more sensitive version that you just described. that's like where like the stereotypical villains come from, the place that they come from, and then the heroes come from a world of almost aspiration, where it's the same root. They want something that didn't that's not yet and hasn't yet come to fruition, but the means of getting there seem to be more seem to be based in more wholesome or meaningful or I guess generally good-willed work, and it's a conflict between the two, and but I guess I think I think all people have both senses, but that's very profound. I never really thought about the difference between like and want. That's very very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been thinking about like for a few days now, and
How'd you get it? How that idea get in your head?
um like it's an interesting it's funny because like it came up from something that's like put into context, it's all very mundane. um but really it was about we brought back a certain beer called Hydra Hef, like it's a wheat beer, like it's a German wheat beer, and but we're kind of questioning whether people want that specific flavor, like if they want a brand, like if there's really a place in the Elysian brand for a traditional German wheat beer. So we've been like thinking like, oh, what if we hop it a different way, what if we make it like a like more like some of the bigger wheat beers that are already on the market. And like obviously this is why I could never be the person making these decisions, because like instead of like crunching numbers, like I start to think in like nebulous, and not even nebulous but like abstract terms of like, is the correct move to deliver what people are used to and put it in a better and new package and hope that that's enough to draw their attention away from it, to draw enough capital away from your competitors? Or do you go along the route where you essentially say to yourself, no, the time of Blue Moon, like that sort of like nice malty wheat beer flavor with like just a little bit of coriander and orange peel funk, the time for that is over. People don't.
The time for Blue Moon is long over, dude.
The time for that is over, and it's like it's up to us to sort of venture and find out. We have to find out what people want, because people don't know what they want. We have to discover and deliver it to them and make it known to the people. Oh, this is what you've been looking for. This is the new thing you didn't even know you liked up until now, because now that you've discovered it, it's like we have just performed this Herculean task of informing you that you wanted this, and
Yeah,
now you're going to like it. And now now instead of buying a six pack of Blue Moon every other week, now you're gonna be buying a six pack of our beer every other week.
sure, sure. Well, that's actually you inadvertently just described the entire corporate Hollywood routine, right? Which is create a movie, which is to be enormously financially conservative when it comes to any kind of and it comes to any kind of creative risk, right? I mean, you never hear of a story of a first-time director going to Hollywood being like, "Listen, I got a great idea for a movie. It's going to be incredible art, and it's going to tell the story of this X, Y, and Z human condition, and and it's going to be great. But I want Brad Pitt and Margaret Robbie starring in it, right?" And the studios will tell you to go jump in the lake, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not happening. They're not giving you the money for it. So they start off enormously fiscally conservative, but if you're lucky, you could try to get you could try to get a creative break, and then if you're really talented, then you get in there, right? So what's the first? So let's say so now this movie costs $100 million to make, or or $50 million to make, or whatever it is, and I mean these low budget movies are even as much as 3 or 4 million, right? Um, and then the movie does well, and then all of a sudden, it makes $10 million, $50 million, $100 million, $500 million, and the studio goes, now I want three more of exactly that. And you're like, but the whole point of this was that it was a creative risk to begin with, and that like you're not that it's not what you already have five of until now. And the whole point of coming up with this idea was because everyone is sick of seeing the 14th Transformer movie and the 38th Marvel movie. So why don't we try something
Right.
that that's new in the studio, and then the whole process starts again, right? The studios go nope. So I think that that's a constant balance in life, and I think you need people that are. I think that in order to really succeed as a company, you need both. Like I mean, famously, Roy Disney was creative, but as much of a he was blinders on Disney on Walt Disney, right? So Walt Disney would have this outrageous idea of what he wanted to do, and he'd say, "Roy, go get it done." And Roy's like, "Dude, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life." End quote. Right? And then it'd be like, "No, I'm telling you," he goes, "Dude, Bank of America already gave us $50 million for this movie that we're not done with. You want to go ahead and ask for another $500 million to make Disney World?" He's like, "Yeah." And he was like, "No." And so like, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But you know what? I mean, if he wasn't fiscally conservative, then Disney would have overshot with his creative ambitions, then burnt out. And then if you were too fiscally conservative, then you just don't take any you don't take any creative chances, and you miss the opportunity to actually generate money. It's the same thing my dad and I go through, and I never want to stock inventory, and I always people will always call me, "Hey, I'm selling this machine and that machine, and you can get it for 10 cents on the dollar," and I'm like, I'm not looking to buy anything right now and have a customer lined up for it. My dad will be like, "Dude, I'll take 10. You have 10, I'll take 10." And I'm like, "But you don't have anyone lined up to buy it." And the truth is that his business model is a little out of whack, and my business model is way out of whack. And together, we kind of just try to balance each other out based on our the opposing personalities.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, whether you want to translate it in terms of how risk averse a person is and versus like what each person's talent is. Uh, no, I mean, like, I don't really have anything to add to that. Like, it's all everything in life is really just about finding a balance for the most part.
Yeah, or if you don't know how to find the balance, to surround yourself with people that do, right? That's the important thing, right? For
People who
every
can push back on you in the right ways.
Yeah, or for example, if like I know that I'm not detail oriented, and I hate following a large series of steps, right? When I first moved into my townhouse, and after I first got married, our grill sat on the side for 6 months because I didn't have the pay because I could not bring myself to follow that 15 step manual. My wife had to do it. I mean, or she had to at least get the process started, and then I came and I joined and I helped out. But 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 that's a skill that I know that when it comes to things in my life, when it comes to filing taxes, when it comes to following these processes, when it comes to doing paperwork to start my new job teaching at a school, like she's the one that's helping me out because that's something I'm conscious that I'm not good at dealing with, and and she's got that. So, you got to surround yourself with people that have have the strengths that you lack. I think it's really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so, dude, so first of all, I want to know your thoughts on the debate that happened last week.
Um, no, what, like, just in general, the
In
implications
general,
of it, or
oh, just
uh,
whatever comes to mind.
sure. No, I mean, it's funny watching the way things play out and trying to piece them together in a plausible sense of cause and effect. I mean, sorry, you know what? I'm kind of even getting ahead of myself. What I think happened, it's
Who do you
weird.
think won the debate?
I think Trump won the debate, but I think it's kind of the plausibility of the other side mostly comes from the fact that he didn't win it by as large a margin as he did with his debate with Joe Biden.
Oh,
And that
interesting. So you think that
and
because
that was
because yeah.
and that was mostly because Trump didn't even have to do much in the first debate, because he kind of Joe was just so out of it that he kind of just was hoisted by his own petard. Trump just had to stand there and look pretty much presidential.
Or at
Whereas
least
with
confused. It's a little
right,
confused. So everyone could be like, "Yeah, no one has any idea what this guy's talking about." Unfortunately, which I still feel
right,
terrible about.
exactly, but where in the first debate it was Trump versus it wasn't even really Trump versus anybody. It was like Joe Biden kind of like hanging himself. Uh, in this debate, in the most recent debate, it was Trump versus Kamala Harris and the two moderators. It was kind of a
Sure.
return. It was kind of a return to form of in 2016
Right.
with those debates. So the fact that I think the fact that Trump was able to hold his own, that's kind of I mean, I would count that as a win for him. But in terms of optics, it wasn't the knockout blow that everybody was kind of expecting,
Yeah.
because the odds were stacked against him.
Right.
And so yeah, I don't really think this really moved the needle for very many people. So yeah, in pure terms of like who won the debate, I would say Trump. But in terms of in terms of the optical implications of how things move the needle, I think it was a little bit of a stalemate. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of where things stand. It'll be. I mean, that's kind of what I'm expecting when I see the next round of polling that comes out.
Yeah. Which I actually so I'm not all in on the current system of polling. I think it's wildly out of it's I think it's miss I think the polls are essentially taken from people whose average age is between 65 and 75, who are the primary people that are still consuming mainstream news and that are bothering to respond to polls and talk to them. So I think that when it comes to following those polls, the finger's really off the pulse, of like what our society really thinks. So I don't know that I would necessarily look to the polling to identify whether or not it was a good, whether or not it moved the needle at all, right? What I think would be a better way of a better indication would to be take the top 10 podcasts, take the top 10 Instagram report, not Instagram, Twitter reporters, take the top, Instagrammers that have the most reach to, their audience, and see what they say, because they have exponentially more viewership on a far more relevant demographic, you know?
Uh, yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely a good way to do it. If you're talking about the independent content creators who
They're the
are,
only one that that most people believe. Like most people below the age of 40, 45, they're the only source of news they're getting are independent content creators at this point.
right, no, exactly. That is a good point. I will say though, however, when I talk about paying attention, the value in polling mostly comes from an aggregated sense, an aggregated scattershot of data sets. A very good tool that I use all the time is RCP, because they're not pollsters. They are an aggregator of different polling firms,
Oh,
and
interesting.
what they do is that they will aggregate and disaggregate data based on all sorts of metrics that you could want, and they have information of about that they'll display information about methodology, sample size, who was being polled, the demographics of which, and they will they'll actually look at different polling firms and grade them versus grade them on it's like who out of everybody that this polling firm has sampled for this polling firm in this series of time in this frame of in this time frame, it's like do they outsample Republicans or Democrats and by how much. And the thing about the polls is, you are correct, and the interesting thing about it is, it's important that when you look at polling and you're trying to get information of what people think, the aggregated polling data is the most important because that can at least give you an accurate trajectory, how public opinion shifted from one point to the other. It can get a little bit you can get a little bit in the weeds. You can kind of end up like running around like a chicken with your head cut off if you're terminally like hooked into it, and you're worried if a poll about approval ratings, or one candidate versus the other, or one candidate versus the other in a five-way race, shifts 1 point versus 1 point down or 1 point up over the next week. General trajectory is over a broader sense of time, is a better way of determining how public opinion is shifting. And the reason that that's the best information you can get from polling is as follows. And Karl Rove and Nate Silver and Frank Luntz, if you sat down and talked with them, they would tell you this. The objective of pollcraft is actually twofold. Ostensibly, the way most people understand it, it is to gauge public opinion. But if you look at but if you've ever been polled, and I've been polled, and I'll tell you exactly how this works. Uh, the idea of polling, the secondary polling objective of polling that is a bit more cynical. It's kind of the dark side of
It's
the
to
moon,
shape. It's
is
to
to
shape
shape
the.
public opinion.
I yeah.
I've been polled before. I've actually been polled a few months ago,
Oh yeah.
and the guy who was calling me has one of the questions. It was about the general election, and he said he didn't ask me, who are you more likely to vote for, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Okay, great, thank you for your time. He asked a series of questions ranging on economics and foreign policy and all that.
No way.
One of them really stood out, and how each candidate approached them. But if you want to know how skewed it is, and why a lot of independent voters and who are intend to vote for Trump are not answering these polls according to how they actually feel, it's because of this. One of the questions I was asked was, I'm basically quoting this verbatim. Uh, in January, on January 6th of 2021, former President Trump incited a violent riot that resulted in the death of multiple police officers. Does this make you more or less likely to want to vote for him?
Wow. That's the way they phrase it, huh?
That is the way they phrased it. That is
That does
why
not seem very objective to me. I don't
it's
know if you
not.
ask.
because
If you yeah.
because these polls are designed to get an intended result.
But that seems a little flagrant. Doesn't it seem a little that seems a little flagrant for me that like it's too much leading someone on. And I would
That's
like
what
if
it
you
is,
want to like,
man.
it's not I know, but it's not even subtle is my point. Like there have to be subtle ways of approaching, trying to sway people one way or the other because in case you do
I
want to feign objectivity. You want to pretend that your polls are kind of objective, right?
I'm not saying that every question was like that. I picked that one because that one stood out the most.
Sure.
But most
But
questions
just
are
that one
phrased
question throws off the whole thing.
but most questions are phrased in such a way, with a specific context in mind, that you are fed before you give an answer.
Wow,
That
that's
is
very
how most
interesting.
polling questions work.
That's really interesting, dude. That really, really is. Because if I were the person that were if I wanted to start a polling, I don't know, business organization, I think, right? Is that what you call it? I would
A polling firm, yeah, yeah.
firm organization, yeah. Um, I would want to say that I'm the best polling firm because I'm giving you the most reliable and unskewed data, right? I think, and by the way, this is why I really believe that these are going to be one of the last years, or maybe the last decade, if they're lucky, the last decade that any big corporate news media is going to be, that is going to be doing polling at all, because when you're so far from pretending to be objective and just show the results, as opposed to like what you said, the second and more sinister option of trying to steer people towards particular results, right? If you're so blatant about it, then people lose their trust and faith in you. And then the next polling that you're going to find or that everyone's going to be using is going to happen on TikTok or Twitter, and that's going to be what and just like, by the way, I'm sure the presidential debates in the future will be held on Twitter or something like that. Certainly not going to be, I don't think, ABC or Fox or CNN, because I think by next election, if you have anyone that's not Donald Trump and you're going for a second debate and then they say, okay, you're going to ABC, you're saying, fuck you, I'm not going to ABC. Not, and again, not, same thing applies for Fox. If Fox, if Trump told Kamala Harris, I'm going to debate you, but on Fox News, she'd tell him to go fuck himself. Now, that makes sense, right? It's very reasonable. But now that everyone knows that that's what the case is, people are going to want to start looking for some kind of even ground or some kind of more objective footing, and that's where, and so I think that the good news is that because they're so blatant and flagrant about this, the big corporate media today, because they've clearly lost so much general trust, which is why so many more people are consuming independent media as opposed to their content. Then that means that they've overplayed their hand, and it means that they've done too much, and now instead of trying to get people's trust back, they're just going down with the ship, and that's what's also bizarre to me. I mean, I think that if you realize that because people mock Joe Rogan, but it's very hard to mock someone that gets 11 or 12 million dollars, 12 million listeners every episode that they put out 4 days a week on average, right? Or 5 days a week on average.
Right.
Like
Uh,
how do you compete with that? And how do you even pretend that how do you pretend that you're not a much bigger joke than they are at that point? Like,
I
if
think
you're honest with yourself.
I think the incentive to continue, because everything you've said about the trajectory of media in general, how the legacy media are approaching the situation and what their viewership is versus that of independent content creators, that's all true, and that has been for a while. But I think you're placing too much value on what you call trust. The reason that if it was really just about that, if trust was tied to viewership, if you were covering politics and covering, matters of civic importance in such a way that trust in your organization corresponded more or less to your viewership and how well you did, then all these companies, all these brands, they would have died out. They would have fully died out a long time
They
ago.
they
What
pretty much are
the
though.
niche
CNN's
the
big
niche
bankrupt, dude.
what the demand that they're currently filling though is that of confirmation bias. I think. I don't think people tune into MSNBC talking about, something Donald Trump didn't actually say because it's like, oh, but this is MSNBC. I trust MSNBC. They tune in because they already hate Trump. You could report that Donald Trump, kicks puppies and drowns kittens in his spare time because anonymous sources told us so, and the people who are already predisposed to hate him will tune in and listen
Yes,
because you're
yes,
feeding into
yes,
confirmation bias.
yes,
That's
yes,
that's
yes.
that's the
But
demand in the market of that's the demand that they're filling essentially.
I know, but there's so many ways to fill that demand without that media, because at a certain point, like what people used to do, right? Like you'd say, oh, I heard this in the news, right? I heard this in the news, and then you'd kind of just take it for a fact, right? And then at a certain point, it became like, I heard it in the news. You'd be like, oh, which news station did you hear it from? Right. And then it was like, oh, well, I heard it from Fox. It's like, okay. That's, I'm probably has a relatively right leaning twist to it. And I heard it on MSNBC, and that probably has a relatively left leaning twist to it. And you're like, okay, but like, it's a news story. It's got to be, like, it's got to be true to be on the news like that. And now I think that less people than ever, which is why the average age of the average age of these viewers are above 65. Um, I think now if someone told me I saw a news story about X, Y, and Z, I'd be like, that is I am so sure that's full of shit. You know, like it's so far removed from any kind of kernel of truth that you can't even like people can't even pretend that like they even believe what they say anymore.
CNN could report a sunrise, and I'll be asking for a second opinion.
Right, right. And but I feel the same way about Fox, and I almost feel the same way about the Wall Street Journal to a certain extent.
Yeah, and that's warranted.
Sure,
And mostly because I mean, first of all, like not even much to do with the fact that most of these alphabet news agencies are owned by the same two parent companies,
sure.
but the fact that I think the sort of brand of the legacy media in general, where it's like, oh, if you're vaguely left leaning, you would listen to CNN and MSNBC, whereas if you're more right leaning, you kind of feed your confirmation bias by listening to Fox. But things are fine because, bias aside, it's like you're still getting the same news stories reported
Right,
with
right,
reported with each reported in different ways, but within a respectable margin of objectivity.
right.
That's the paradigm that has been dead for
5 years now.
almost a decade. I would say even almost a decade at this point.
You think since 2016 or
I
2015 when
think
Trump first announced his running,
I
that's when it
th-
all went to shit.
I think that was the beginning of the end.
So the next thing that I was thinking about that I definitely that I was listening to. Are you familiar with Eric Weinstein?
Eric Weinstein. He was the professor at that really
Yeah, well,
crazy school in
him
Washington State, right?
him and his brother were actually. I think they both were, I believe. One's a biologist and one's a physicist, or one's an evolutionary biologist, one's a physicist, right?
Okay, yeah. This he sounds familiar. I remember listening to him on a podcast with Jordan Peterson a long time ago. But yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. Um, so I was listening to him this past week. He was on the Diary of a CEO. You ever hear of that podcast?
No, no.
It's interesting. I mean, it's very very well done, and the guy gets really really spectacular guests, really top notch top tier guests in terms of their their position within in whatever medium they're in. Um, and so he's talking to Weinstein, and he was saying that because everything, I guess, first of all, because news doesn't feel real anymore, partially, but also because we live in a culture where everything turns into a meme and a joke so quickly. We lose opportunities to have significant moments of reverence and and like American snapshot important moments, right, in our lives, because we're always being just flooded with jokes about everything that happens on a regular basis and making fun of and memes and tweets and online dunks and everything like that. And he goes, and we lost our capacity to have an iconic moment, right? And like a national moment. Um, I think that's probably tied in with all this too. I think that I don't, I think that there are certain Americans that can maybe the previous generation or the generation before that or even before that that can like pinpoint like a moment in their lives where they're like, this was like a experience as a country, like this was like a moment. I think we had that when we shut down for COVID and the entire America stopped overnight, but we haven't had any kind of moment of reverence and patriotism um, in probably 20, probably 15, 20 years, right?
I would say for the most part you're right. Actually, let me hit you with a radical idea. I understand what you're saying, that when it comes to the experience of a nation, when we are hit with moments where we can sense that we're at a pivotal moment in history.
Yes, right.
that, organically speaking, um, doesn't need you don't need a media complex in order to have that. Even though it kind of feels that way because, like with 9/11 and the moon landing and the assassination of JFK, everybody was sitting and watching those things on their television. And I think it feels less like that now, like the memes are more in the more irreverent side, and when people make jokes, that's pushed more to the forefront because of the way social media is structured compared to
The
a
way the
news
news is structured.
broadcast.
Right. But can
The
you
thing, the
imagine? No, but
thing,
can you imagine for just a second if George Bush or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton got shot while they were running for re-election, right? And they're the nominee for their party, and they're shot, and through the gunshots with a bloody face, they stand up with with their fist in the air, and there's a big American flag behind them. Tell me that that would not be one of the most pivotal moments that textbooks would already have incorporated if it happened to a Bush or a Clinton or something like that, right?
it, it would
This
have.
moment is gone. That moment is gone from our nation's memory right now. You know?
And I would say the reason for that is not because it was preeminent on social media. It wasn't preeminent the way because the legacy media wanted to memory hole that. They did not want that to be a pivotal moment in history that united everybody, because it unites
Do you
everybody.
think it will
It
be?
unite it. I mean, it has though. It has. That's the only reason. From what we've discussed in terms of how polling is conducted and versus the interests of the legacy media corporations.
Oh,
What
nice.
other explanation could there be of the idea that
More people
it's just
care
memory
about it than we
hold
know.
now, and the idea that Trump only got a small bump in his election chances after having an attempt on his life, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it is smoke and mirrors from a dying institution, and
Right.
I
So at what point do you think that we kind of install it into American culture, American history as a defining moment? Do you think
here's
after Trump's dead? Do you think 10 years after he's dead? What do you think?
it's already happened, and here's the real radical idea. Uh,
Yeah.
think back to Roman history, right? When we think of Roman history, we think of it in very textbook terms. Caesar conquers Gaul. There's trouble in the Senate where people are nervous about his expansion, and and then he does the unthinkable and he crosses the Rubicon. He utters that famous phrase about the die being cast. He marches into Rome, and various specific bullet pointed events later that you can rattle off with increasing profundity based on how knowledgeable you are, until you get to him getting stabbed in 44 BC. The aspect of history when we look at that we often forget is that at the same time that was going on, people in the streets of Rome were drawing graffiti, rude, dirty graffiti of Caesar's wife naked.
Were they? Is that a fact?
Yeah, yeah, dude. Watch HBO's Rome. And the best character of that series, I would argue, is not Caesar. It's not Mark Antony. It's not Pasca, Caesar's slave. It's not Pompey Magnus. It's not Octavian. It's not Marcus Tullius Cicero. It's Rome itself, because the way that they portray Roman life and the way people responded to events was honestly one of the best parts of that show. The way we live in historical moments are uh, like they manifest in terms of things that are short-lived, because most of what people say are because they come out of what people are thinking extemporaneously.
Right. That's
And
not such a radical idea, dude. Why is that such a radical idea?
well, no, because it's so different than what you said about a sort of grand solemnity that comes from a
Oh well,
nation
I would
coming
love to be wrong.
together.
That sounds great. I mean, listen, that sounds wonderful. I would so much. That's not radical. I think that that was your very kind and patient way of saying that my point was I'm not gonna say idiotic, but just incorrect.
No,
And
it's not even that you're wrong. It's just that I think what you're looking for is sort of a construction of something that isn't entirely relevant anymore, and really the sort of coming together, even though it's not in the same sort of context that one would have expected from an event like this happening 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. uh, like the memes that you see on Twitter, that sort of collective gestalt, it may seem, what's the word, mercurial, and it may seem kind of like lowbrow because like obviously like a lot of memes are crass and all that, but I think it's important to have the perspective that that is the important, like you are living in the historical moment when you see the memes coming out of an assassination attempt on the former president of the United States. That's the
wow, because it's almost
that's
verbatim
the
what
real
happened.
that's
Right,
the real historical moment. That's your
right.
real connection into the Gestalt.
Wow, that's awesome, dude. That's awesome, dude. That's brilliant. Did you just think of that?
I guess.
Wow, that was so brilliant, dude. I mean, listen, I hope so. I hope so. I've started approaching a lot of these issues like I approach or like these thoughts or these kind of concerns um, the same way that I do when I'm dealing with personal like challenges or conflict in my life, which is pretty much to say how much of a shit am I going to give in 20 years from now or in 2 months from now or in 2 days from now, and if it's not, if the answer is nothing, then I'm not getting emotionally invested in like this in this fashion, like it's just not worth it. Um, but I think that I guess I have to look at these kind of issues like that too. Like the fact that we don't seem to have anything sacred right now is that sacred moment that we're going to experience in 50 years as a nation. We're going to be like, at the time, we had social media, which was rampant, had no restrictions, and anyone was able to use it at any age. And then the kids will be like, "What? No, what are you talking about?" And it'll be like, and then everything became a meme, and then they'll be like, "What? You're still allowed, they were allowed to do that? Anyone could just put a meme anywhere at any time, like it'd be very funny, pretty cool."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the implications of a historical moment, I think the now, in terms of what you experience, like whatever you think you're gonna however you think you're gonna feel about something 20 years from now, is immaterial in terms of how important it is to consider the ramifications of how things are going to be impacted in the short term and consequently in the long term.
Right.
Like when we talk about Americans, the idea that we have these moments where we all come together, right? And like it's unfortunate, this is an unfortunate thing to think about, but I think it relates a positive note for optimism in the future because of the way things have sort of changed. I think this is a positive message because we have an opportunity to learn from mistakes from the past. Think of how we as America sort of quote unquote came together after 9/11. And I'm not saying that we didn't, but we came together under other people's terms. We came together under terms that we only found out to our bitter
Yeah.
realization much later
which is
were
also Jewish
not
history, by the
were,
way.
were not for our benefit. We were
Right.
supposed to come together and just sort of, it's like, what did coming together after 9/11 mean? Onerous security measures that were supposed to be temporary, but we're still dealing with
No, but
today.
that's not what we're talking
Taxes.
about. I'm talking
No,
about
no.
social coming together, dude. I'm talking
So,
about people would be
oh,
nice to each other and wear American flags, and like you were like you looked at each other like you were like you were a collective group of people that that are
no, 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 no,
proud to
no.
be together.
But this is what I mean, though. This is what I mean, though. Uh, the fact that after 9/11, it's like, oh, we're not Democrats and Republicans, we're not right leg or left leg, like we're all Americans.
Yeah.
I, you know, I don't want to sound like an asshole. Like I don't want to pretend like that idea isn't inherently beautiful and appealing. But I think it's important to maintain a sense of honesty that never really goes away. I think even in that
What
moment,
doesn't go away?
the fact that a software engineer from California who volunteers their time with, some anti Second Amendment organization has nothing in common with a rancher from Wyoming. And the idea that we all sort of come together as Americans, it's like based on a tragic event. It's like it's
Listen, it doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everyone.
it's a worthwhile idea, but I think at the end of the day, it's doomed to be tenuous, which is why we have to be honest about these things, and why when it comes to the implications of how we let these historical moments shape us, especially when we're in the moment, we have to approach it with a sense of honesty where the best thing that it can do, I mean, the positive thing that I think you can and should draw on is the sense that we can have a sense of respect for each other. Uh, but as long as the idea that because I think a part of the problem today is that people are kind of coming to the realization that we're all Americans, like we all think the same, we all bleed the same American blood. That idea has kind of been revealed to be a false bill of goods.
So
And
I don't think that's true. I think that it only lasts for so long when we're brought together. So let's say after 9/11, it lasted a year or 5 years or whatever amount of time it was. And then, we start taking it for granted, the feelings fade, and you need more events that would hypothetically bring it together. And I think we're far too divided, unfortunately, about what we could even think about Donald Trump, right? Um, to even like I think we're so deep into that divide that it's not that moment is not going to make everyone say we're just Americans, because I think that there's so many people that have been saying for so long that this should be happening to him, that this isn't one of the, we don't realize this is one of those moments. We'd need hypothetically a bigger moment or even a bigger win. It doesn't have to be a tragedy, but let's say we do something really incredible and we beat China to something, or we beat, or we beat Russia to something. And we're really proud to be the American nation. That I think will like that pride doesn't necessarily won't last forever, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I think that pride just only comes every 20, 30, 40 years, you know?
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. And I don't even disagree with you in the philosophical sense. I think the thing that I wasn't making myself clear on was that I'm talking uh, what's good for our nation in a civic sense. The fact that we've kind of gotten away from our identity as the United States plural. Uh,
Yes, 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 sure.
right.
You're saying that the consequence of something like that is that the federal, the America of America and not the components of America becomes too front and center, and then could take advantage of that.
When the fact that power has been concentrated more and more in the centralized location of Washington, D.C., that people care more and more with each election cycle, with each usurpation of and centralization of power on the national level, when really the biggest forces that should be oppressing you should be coming from the local and state level. Uh, the fact that we care more and more about how power is allocated in Washington D.C. because because it's so that it's that much further removed from us as individual that in the civic sense we feel more powerless, and when the general election comes rolling around
Yes,
there's a greater
yes,
sense of anxiety because there's so much more on the line. That's what we have to sort of get away from. We have to stop thinking that, all of the nation has to be governed the same way, because each state and each peoples within those states and each demographics which they're in, aggregated and disaggregated, however you want to slice it, uh, it's not really a tenable way of doing things. And I think that this insistence that, you know, or no, 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 sorry, it's not even that. I think the fact that the attempted assassination on the former president has swayed so few people from one side to the other is, I think, one of the most demonstrative examples of exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah. So what I really focused in on that I think that really caught my attention is, and what I really believe I agree very strongly with, is that I think that people really feel powerless to. We don't like it only ever occurred to me for the first time recently when someone said that the government works for us, and like their job is to work for us, right? Like we collectively pay the the federal tax, taxes with salaries, and they're supposed to work for us. But the people, I think, especially since COVID, people are completely hopeless and feel like there's nothing that they can do as individuals. And that's actually, I think that's a source of, um, that's probably the source of the biggest American problem today, is that Americans used to feel like the world is at their fingertips, and like if there's authority, you kind of bully authority back a little bit. You push back a little bit, and you kind of fight for what your perspective is. And I think that we're all very afraid to have a perspective today, and or we don't even feel like our perspective could even do much in terms of like, what am I going to do to change the education system? What am I going to do to stop these enormous problems? Well, it's got to be the government. They got to do it. So it's it's sad. It's sad to me, at least. I think it's really heartbreaking.
That's definitely part of it.
And
Um,
then you also have the fact, I think, what's giving a lot of people hope on the other hand, is that when independent media does so well and does and so far outperforms the corporate media, I think a lot of people are starting to say, "Hey, how come not me?" Like, if one guy that starts in a garage and has a podcast that grows into X, Y, and Z, even if it's not the Joe Rogans of the world, even if it's the guys that have five or six sponsors and just make a living doing it, right? Like, they
right.
sway people, like that brings back kind of the American attitude. Like, it is the Wild West of content, and trying to change the world now in that kind of sense.
The decentralization of information is crucial if you ever hope for the decentralization of power.
Yes, right, right, exactly. I mean, and that's exactly why, right, why free speech is the first and most prevalent amendment, and the most under attack, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of like ways to kind of to like phrase these perspectives in like the least incendiary kind of fashion. Like, I don't want it to be like I think something like a First Amendment right is so important that like it can't be one of these stupid hot topic social issues. Like it doesn't equate to to something like women in the workplace or something like that. Like it doesn't equate in value and in implication. And so I hope that people don't treat it like that. Like we have to treat it much more seriously and like with a certain like kind of reverence that just I don't know that's there for it.
Um, I mean, I think most of the negativity that you hear on that end comes from amplified fringe voices. I mean, the fact that fringe voices tend to get amplified, uh, just as the way things are. Like, the people who are the most extreme speak the loudest. I think that tends to be the most demoralizing factor. But I think once you take into perspective uh, that most people are amenable to the decentralization of information, regardless of whatever dangers that authoritarian.
But it's not necessarily. I mean, you're not seeing that in London. You're not seeing that in Europe. You're not seeing that in South America. You're definitely not seeing it in China and Russia. So like as far as I think it is important to recognize like we're one of the last legs standing in terms of any any government or or the main any significant government in the world that has free speech left like that like
Well,
that's a big deal, isn't it?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, to the point where it's not happening in other countries. It's not happening. In terms of what we see,
In
it's not.
Canada you can't post whatever you
It's
want.
not. It's not happening. In the sense that it's not legal, but people are speaking out. Even in China, people do speak out under threat of retaliation from the government. It does happen. There is a movement, but I mean, but also just in terms of perspective from the other way, that's sort of always been the case in the legal sense. The United States was ever the only country that ever had any sort of First Amendment right actually codified into law. Right.
Right.
I mean, for a while, ever since the 1960s, the British have sort of touted that they have something similar in their constitution, but their constitution isn't written down. So really, it's completely arbitrary, which is
Wait,
why
their
what
constitution isn't written,
their constitution isn't written.
so how does
So
any
now
who
you,
knows it?
well, that's a good question for another time, and probably for people who are more a better authority on British history and politics and law than I am.
I if I
In all
is
honesty, but
this well known enough in Britain or England that if I ask anyone from there that they'll know about this?
the fact that their constitution that they don't have a written constitution,
Yeah,
I should think so. That's like a pretty basic civic point.
it's a pretty big deal, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds strange and alien to us because, I
I know, but
mean,
how do you know that people aren't arbitrarily making things up? And also, great that Britain says that they have free speech since the 1960s, but they're arresting people for Facebook posts today. So
well,
can't be
I mean,
that.
that's kind of the main thing. It's like, no matter what you write or no matter what a government says, which ideals it wants to adhere to, none of it really matters unless the structure of that government is in such a way that it restricts the power that can accrue and rule from the top down. Power has to flow from the bottom up, which is why America as a free country, that model worked, or at least it worked for a long time, and why it can work.
Right.
It still
It
has the capacity too. Like I
it
don't
will
I
again. It will
it
again. I really hope so. I really
it,
think
it
so.
it will again. Like I'll never I will never ever be one to demoralize people in that regard. I always want to be optimistic in that way. But but I mean that's really the American ideal. That is the American experiment in self-government, as opposed to the European ideal, which is like
Wow, I
no
wish
matter
we
how
taught that.
no matter how liberal a country may be, the government exists. Sorry, the people exist and enjoy whatever benefits of a liberal society people may enjoy. It's all tenuous at best because the people the people the state, it will always be the more sovereign entity than the people. The state does not, under the European ideal, the state does not serve the people. It's the other way around. The
Right.
people will always be subservient to the state.
Right, right. So we need to, so I believe that we have to learn that, and that has to be a main subject in an American conversation, in American education. I think that that is so important that that's an idea that should be taught along with the American flag, with learning the national anthem. Like to have the ideal drilled into our head that the government works for us, and that and that the people are what the source of the power are, and that everyone has the potential to be able to do whatever, be go as far as they want. Like that idea um, has to be drilled into people's heads, because I've never thought, until recently, I've never ever thought about it like that. I never ever thought about the relationship to government and people in general. Forget about the power dynamics between the two. I just thought of the government as some kind of entity, like it's somewhere over there in Washington, but like you almost like imagine like a building that just has government on it, and and all these guys like um, running around and pulling levers, and sort of things, just making the country run, and that we're just trying to make, they're like playing God almost for us, but it shouldn't be the case. I mean, that's not the way we should associate it.
Even a rudimentary civics lesson framed entirely within the context of constitutional history and constitutional law would be a far cry from what uh, you usually get in the American education system at this point, which basically, when you learn history in an American school, it's basically slavery and World War II. That's
Yeah,
basically all you
that's
get.
American history. Yeah, yeah. Do you think they're still teaching the national anthem in schools? Because I don't remember, but I don't know if my siblings were.
I mean, when I went to public school, like, I mean, 9/11 happened when I was in second grade, so, like, obviously, like, up until fifth grade, yeah, I mean, like, every morning we would stand up and sing the national anthem. Yeah,
But do you think today they still do?
honestly, I couldn't tell you, and I don't care to find out. I mean, well, I mean, sorry, not that I don't care to find out, but, like, if I had kids right now who were at that age, I would be willing to send them pretty much anywhere but public school.
Yeah, that's another problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
another
think
time.
yeah, for another time. All right, Sam, you want to call it here? Is that what you're implying?
Well, I just looked and I saw we were at 2 hours. I mean, what is it, like midnight for you?
It's pretty late. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you get back to your wife and your little one.
Yes, my little one hopefully should be sleeping still, but absolutely to my wife. All right, brother. Thanks for doing this again. We will do this again whenever we feel the need to catch up. All right.
Always a pleasure. And if you want, we should coordinate soon about sending each other some FedEx labels with some brews.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do that. I want to see. I want to taste all the lagers and all the Heffenweizens and all the. You know what my new favorite beer style is? Schwarz beers. What are they
Schwarzbier,
called?
a good Schwarzbier is great. It's intimidating at first because you think it's gonna be like this huge, like really dark bitter flavor, but it's just like any other lager.
Dude, they're so
That's
good. They're so they have this they're so. I mean, yeah. That's my new favorite. That's my new favorite type of beer, dude. I can't drink sours. I can't drink IPAs. I can't drink stouts. I can drink some stouts. I just had over this weekend. I had with my dad. He came. I actually I forgot to even tell you. I closed on a new house. I closed on a house.
Oh,
Um,
Mazel Tov.
Thank you. It's crazy. But I wanted to talk to you about that, but I totally forgot to bring it up. But so my dad opened the bottle that I had. It was barrel aged, uh, barrel aged stout, aged with a barrel aged barley wine,
Ooh,
um,
wow.
and and they were aged together in a in a sherry barrel, a sherry casket.
Damn.
Um, and it was at like 14.9 or 15% or whatever it was, and it just was like this syrupy sludge that just kind of just
And you were like, throw this away. Where's my Schwarzbier?
dude. And then my friend Kiwi, you'd love this guy. And Kiwi comes over and because we're watching the UFC, we're watching UFC at the house, and Kiwi walks over and he looks and my dad goes, "Oh, you want some beer?" He points to the bottle. He shows him the bottle. He's like, "Yeah, I'll try some." My dad pours it. The first drop comes out, and Kiwi goes, "Nope. This is one of Ephraim's beers that tastes like soy sauce." And he just takes it to the fridge and takes it to the garbage and dumps it out. It's so funny, dude. Like all these pretentious names and like barrel aged barley wine blended and like aged in sherry casks. Like, dude, it tastes like soy sauce.
Soy sauce. It tastes like soy sauce and vinegar.
It's so funny, dude. I was like, and then I tasted it. I'm like, I really get where I really get where he's coming from. Like if they wrote notes of soy sauce on the label, I would really believe them.
Oh boy. Well, listen,
Anyway,
you could do much worse than Schwarzbier. I'll tell you that right now.
yeah, certainly can. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. We'll be in touch, man. All right, thanks for doing this.
I'll talk to you soon, man.
All
Always
right, good
good to
night, everyone.
talk. Good night.
Bye.